Hi, my name is Jamie Sanchez. This is my final media clip project for TESP 350 Assessment and Special Education. A least restrictive environment is defined by the idea of placing students with disabilities in a general education classroom setting. It gives them the opportunity to be as close to general education as we possibly can. It is federally mandated according to special education laws. There are regulations in place that ensure that no student is excluded based off disability. What it means is that you make sure that students with disabilities get as much time with their non-disabled peers as possible. Excuse me. It means that even if you have to modify a curriculum, modify instruction to fit the needs of the student, that you are giving them as much time with their peers as possible to keep them on equal ground for learning and equal opportunity for learning and engagement. It might mean that you are taking students and pulling them for small groups to give them further instruction, to give them some strategies and skills that they can use to build on when they are in the classroom. But it does mean to give them as much opportunity as possible to be in the general education classroom with their peers. Do not ever exclude students from the general education setting just because of their disabilities. It's not only an unfortunate choice, but it is illegal. There are laws set in place for this exact reason. There's some key terms that are related to least restrictive environment, and I wanted to go over a few of those with you. The first one is mainstreaming, and what mainstreaming is it's taking a student with disabilities and placing them in a general education setting alongside their peers. So what we were just speaking about with bringing students with disabilities into the general classroom, making sure that they get to work alongside their peers, putting them on the same level of learning as their peers, even if that means with a modified curriculum. Integration means when students with disabilities are mainstreamed into various activities within the school environment. So this means doing things in addition to being in the general education classroom. It might mean going to PE or a special library lesson. That's integrating their mainstreaming into other areas besides just the classroom. Inclusion is defined as the integration of a student with disabilities into a general education classroom. So full inclusion, for example, would be if a student becomes fully mainstreamed, where they are always in the general education classroom. It might mean that they have para support. It might mean that the special education teacher comes in and gives them support, but they are allowed to learn right next to their peers without being excluded. It's full inclusion. And reverse mainstreaming is something that is very interesting. It's taking a student without disabilities and you bring them into the self-contained classroom that might be more accommodating for the student with disabilities, where they might struggle to work alongside their peers. And it allows the non-disabled students to assist and work with the student with disabilities and give them that same interaction, but in a more comfortable, smaller setting that might be more beneficial for them. The assessment cycle is a process. It's a process that is it's always going. It makes a circle. It's made up of different parts. There's the first step is that you have to define and identify where the learning outcomes are. You have to select what the appropriate assessment and measuring tools are going to be for making sure that students are meeting those learning outcomes. The third step would be to analyze the results, score tests, give assessments to check students' knowledge on the subject or learning outcome. And then the last step would be to adjust or improve. So if you find that something isn't working, an assessment tool is not working for a student, or they're not meeting the objective, then something needs to be changed. We need to try different strategies, different skills, give different tools, try different assessments to check their understanding of the content of the learning outcome. And you just keep going over and over. Once a student masters one learning outcome, then you start the process with another, and it's just a constant circle. And that's why it's called a cycle, because it goes over and over and over again. Some good strategies that a professional, a teacher, can use to encourage parent involvement, participation, would be to establish good communication. Your first impression of somebody is always so important, and as teachers, as educators, parents trust us with their children, and it's very important to set a comfortable, open environment from the very beginning. Make sure that parents know that they can talk to you. Make sure that they know that they can come to you with questions, concerns. They can share good news. They can talk to you when there's trouble going on at home. Anything, any way that you can open that line of communication from the very beginning, and then make sure that it stays open. Check in with them, make conversation with them as they're picking their children up at the end of the day, just so they know and feel like they are comfortable to come and talk to you. So if there's an issue that your student is facing, that their child is facing, they know they can talk to you about what's going on. Another way would be to set up a daily or weekly communication journal. I have used these in the past with students, and every day we would give a summary of how their day was, what kind of things they did. It helped parents to kind of get a look into the day of their child, and they wrote us notes back and let us know if anything from their child had a rough night, so they might be tired, to they came home and celebrated the activity that they did so well on during the day that we had written to them about. And it's a good way to just quickly keep that line of communication open. So it kind of goes with that first idea, but it's an ongoing thing. And so I know that as a parent, it allows me to just quickly put a note in there while I'm thinking about it, and I don't have to try to catch the teacher before or after school, or remember to stop and sit down and write an email. It's a quick, efficient way to keep that line of communication open. Another good strategy that teachers can use is helping parents to set up good homework habits. Sometimes parents struggle and homework becomes a challenge because the children are confused or they're stressed about the homework, and the parents don't understand how to direct the child to understand what they need to understand to get the homework completed, because the way that parents learned isn't always necessarily the way that their children are learning. And so setting up clear policies about here's what's expected of the students every day for homework or every week for homework, finding a balance. You don't want to give them too much or too little. Some children are not going to be able to handle. Most children are not going to be able to handle 3 hours of homework in an evening on a daily basis. And so find a good balance. Find something to keep them engaged and further their education and further their learning of the objective without overwhelming them. Offer enrichment ideas to the parents, strategies, websites that they might be able to use to help their children when they're doing their homework, and so they're not completely lost and stressed because homework is stressful enough. And even set up like workshops to show parents how you're teaching the kids, so that when the students come home, when their children come home and they show them their math and say, I don't get it, the parents have seen this, they are familiar with, oh yeah, that's right, because Mrs. Sanchez showed me when they come to do this, here's what it is. Something that I have personally experienced as a parent is that for Common Core math strategies, our teacher would send a newsletter home, and it would have tips and tools and step-by-step instructions on how to do long division and then show the new way that they would divide, and so parents can see the difference between here's how I would show my child and here's how they're being shown at school. And it allowed them to have a way of understanding to help their children with homework. Social media is a huge part of our society today. So create a classroom Facebook page, share pictures, share, here's what we did today. And it's a good way when parents are already sitting down at the end of the day, in the middle of the day, and they're looking through their Facebook or they're on Instagram or Twitter, whatever it may be, that they can see, oh, hey, look, this is what my daughter did at school today. And it's just another tool that can be used for communication and keeping parents involved. And the last one is involve the parents, involve the families in decision making. Sit down maybe monthly or every other month and have a parent meeting. Invite them to come out, have cookies, and talk about what they like and dislike about what their children are learning or how their children are learning or things that they're doing, and let them have a voice in how you're teaching your children, how you're teaching their children. Because that's important, just as important as how we want to teach our students. It's important to understand what's expected of us from our parents, because our parents are a vital part of our students' lives. So derived scores are different things. They are percentile ranks, they are standardized scores, they are stanines, and they're all a little bit different, and they have some similarities. The percentile is the percentage of students that fall below the raw score. So this is pretty easily calculated. If you have 100 students and 50 students scored below what I did, that would put me at the 50th percentile. 51st percentile. So, for example, if my score was in the 50th percentile, then that means 49 other students scored lower than I did. It's a quick thing to calculate. It's really easily scored, and it's a good way to kind of judge where a student is in relation to their peers or other students. Standard scores. A standard score is also known as like the z-score or a standard deviation. It is the distance of that student's score from the average, from the mean of the group. And so if the average score of the group is a 70 and I score an 80, what's my standard deviation? What is my standard score above the average of the group? The other one, the last one, it's somewhat like the standard score. It works from the average of the group, but it works off a different scale. And so if you break it into like the lowest score to the highest score is on a scale of 1 to 9, anything that's less than 3 is going to be below average. Anything from 4 to 6, which is about the middle, is going to be the average, and anything 7 to 9 is going to be above average. And I have a chart here that kind of shows all these things. So down here you see the percentage in the stanine. So right here you see 4 to 6. This would be your average range of scores. And then anything below this line, this way, that's going to be below average. And anything over this way to the right is going to be above average. Now the same thing works for standard deviations. So here's your standard deviations right here. Here's the middle. This is your mean, your average. So like the example I gave before, if I scored an 80 and the average was 70, I might be over here, one standard deviation above the average. So that is a summary of how that all works. And thank you for letting me share in this instruction and in your course. Thank you.